rather than me sort of spouting on a little bit about ChemAxon and the usual sort of CEO type introductions, at our user group meeting in Europe earlier on this year, we sort of decided on a new format where I invite somebody to give a keynote talk, and the sort of theme around those talks is more about the challenges facing the industry generally, rather than sort of an inward look at what ChemAxon wants to push on the world. So Ashley George from GSK actually presented in May in Budapest and talked about the challenges of externalization and how that's affecting the way that within GSK they have to handle the deal with data, and followed it up with a very nice presentation of ChemAxon's Instant JChem on the cloud, managing or sort of working data that GSK have for malaria. So that's the kind of project that we got together with them. Anyway, today we are privileged to have a guest from Pfizer, which is Sarah Blendermann. Sarah is, I'll get the whole title now, because she's only put part of it up there. She's Senior Director of Chemistry and Pharmacology Information at Pfizer. So Sarah, do you want to step up to the podium? Come and join me. Basically, as this microphone working here, you need to just switch that on. Is that working?
I'm on.
Okay, so there you go. Good. So, Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And everybody say, good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
So Sarah is currently working on sort of chemistry and pharmacology. She was previously also working in the area of worldwide regulatory affairs and quality assurance informatics.
A lighthearted area.
Yeah, very light. Yeah. Responsible for supporting the operational, strategic, and intelligence gathering capabilities of Pfizer's global regulatory business.
Ta-da.
So there you go. Prior to that, however, and what makes I think her background quite interesting is that she worked for 14 years at ACS, working also on ACS journals and similar projects. So she comes from a non-profit background, which I think is a bit of a novelty. She received, the other great novelty here is how many people here have an arts degree instead of a science degree? One. Great. You see, I also have an arts degree. I think I'm the only person in ChemAxon to have a BA instead of a BSc or an MSc, or most of them have PhD. So I always feel myself a little bit under qualified. So I was really delighted to find out that Sarah's got a BA from Michigan University in political science. So we are fellows after all. I learned last night, Sarah, that you live in a 48-foot house.
I do.
Now, I would have thought that someone in your position could afford something a bit bigger.
Well, our 48-foot house is the number of animals that we have in our house. So if you add up the total number of feet between dogs, cats, lizards, birds, and people, we have a 48-foot house.
Okay, nice. I also understand that you've been to the Catamaran Resort previously.
I have.
Should we not talk about that?
Well, about 18 years ago, I was sitting out looking at a group of chemists at an ACS local section officers conference meeting, and beginning, a torrid relationship with a person who's now my husband.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a little sentimental about this place.
So there you go. So it's good to come back, isn't it? Sarah is also a board member of the Pistoria Alliance. Actually, Sarah and I are both members of the Pistoria Alliance. And that's a kind of, how would you describe the Pistoria Alliance these days, do you think, in Pfizer terms?
So we're trying to find our sea legs for which area we're going to make the most difference in. So I'd say initially we thought it was going to be chemistry, but now we're looking more in the translational medicine space. Yeah,
I would also describe Pistoria as a kind of think tank of how to manage data. And it's actually a large number of large farmers in it and vendors too. So it's a think tank of farmer and vendors. In terms of your work, Sarah, you've come from non-profit. You arrived in at Pfizer just at the sort of times of great mergers with Wyeth. At a sort of personal level, how does your life change in terms of the way you work and the way you deal with your work?
So it never stops, meaning there's always something new coming along. There's always another vendor with a new take on something we've had for the past 10 years. There's a business customer who's changed dramatically the way they work. And the expectation isn't that you've got 2 years and $5 million to roll out a big program of work. They really want you to make sure that you get it done in the next 6 to 18 months max.
And does that put different pressures on the way you have to manage your life as working? Is working in a profitable, is a sort of so-called profitable organization versus non-profit? Is it a kind of different rhythm?
I hate to say this, but these days I talk to Pfizer and say my nonprofit background is actually really helpful for what we're facing now. As we look at budget reductions and we look at a changing landscape, you really do need to learn how to leverage the things you already have in-house rather than build something new. So I think it actually adds to what I'm doing now, but it was dramatically different when I got there 5 years ago.
Okay. Mergers and acquisitions have hit the vendor community as well. How does that, and that sort of has an impact on presumably the way you view vendors. What impact might that have on the way you view vendors in the M&A environment?
So I hadn't done an M&A prior to Wyeth, and I was looking forward to the experience of seeing what it was like to rationalize systems, but I didn't count on the whole contract and content side to things. And so you have people that you've partnered with for a long time and have had a great relationship who suddenly are looking at two of their biggest customers merging. And they're expecting that 1 + 1 = 2, and they'll come out relatively whole. When we merged with Wyeth, 1 + 1 = 0.8. And so having that conversation with people and letting them know you're committed to their success, but at the same time the budget realities have changed, is a really difficult conversation. So you want to do some roadmap planning with them too, to say, you know, we're going to have this type of conversation now, but I want to know where you're going in the next 18 months to see if there are areas that are worth investing in or partnering in to build new product. It's an interesting mix.
Tough one too. Just going into sort of ChemAxon and Pfizer, our main interaction, aside from some use of JChem and Marvin in individual projects, has really been around the Marcouche technology. What was the key point for you for investing in our Marcouche technology?
So one of the things we looked at was this was relatively new space. We were able to get in early. We were able to get favorable licensing terms because we were one of the ones in there early. I'd encourage you guys to join so we all can enjoy the cost benefit of having a package out there that everybody's using. But largely it was because it was collaborative and we could help shape the product. So Chris Kibbe, who's here from Pfizer, has done a lot of the work with the tool that we're talking about and being able to say, this is working, this isn't working, we'd like to see this in the next version, being able to help kind of evolve the product as it goes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we had the Marcouche Forum yesterday, which is where we actually have a sort of think tank of sharing ideas about the development of the Marcouche product, which is also a co-development with Thomson Reuters, who have the data. And Chris Kibbe is going to present, I'm not sure if it's today or tomorrow, but we're looking forward to that presentation. Let's move on to your slides then, and see what you're going to actually talk to us about.
This is a point where physical comedy could come into play because I'm up on the stage and I'm looking over here. So if I suddenly take a tumble, I'll ask you guys to help me rate my fall. 10 being high, 1 being low. So shall we just kind of launch in?
Why don't you tell me what all these lovely colors are?
Aren't they? Isn't this nice? It's a Pfizer official template.
Okay, cool.
So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the past 2.5 years in research informatics. I've been in the role with Pfizer for about 2.5 years. The first 6 months was really just understanding the existing landscape. Not a lot was changing. We weren't having big personnel changes, big business changes. And then Wyeth hit. And Wyeth was a year-long scrum of about 80 to 100 systems we had to rationalize to say which ones are we keeping, why are we keeping those, writing off the asset, retiring the systems, getting duplicate content rationalized, things like combining your files, your registry file. But then on the business side, while we're busy making all those kind of things happen, there were other dramatic changes. You've had your entire leadership shift. You've entered biotherapeutics with a passion. So suddenly you have whole new modalities that you're looking at with systems that were largely small molecule focused. Now people want to know how you're doing large molecules. Then you also end up with a second event a year later, which is ESI, Engine for Sustainable Innovation, where we cut $2 billion out of Pfizer R&D, with another $2 billion expected in administrative savings. So you might imagine that's a little disruptive, both in terms of staffing, your business customers, the areas that they're looking at. And we created a whole bunch of different infrastructure bits. And I know some of this may be happening at groups that you're working in and some may not. So I'll just tell you a little bit about kind of the changes that we're seeing in hopes that you will see some of them, but maybe not all of them at one time. We have something called Centers for Therapeutic Innovation, which are open centers where we're inviting partners who we're collaborating with to come in, bring your own desktop, different security model than we've had before, controlling access to which applications you're licensed to use and which ones you're not. We have chief scientific officers for each of our research units who are now fully enabled with budget control for all of the activities that are used to support their therapeutic area. Things like chemistry and PDM and other activities now receive the majority of their funding at the discretion of the CSOs. They have the core funding elements for running their operations, but anything else they have to receive from a CSO. So when you're looking at rolling out things like new capabilities across chemistry, you really have to understand the changes that your business have made, what the impact is to the research unit that you're going to be asking for money, and how you expect your changes in your program to deliver drug.
Sounds a complex thing. Is this what you call navigating the whitewater then?
Well, it is. And then on top of everything else...
Is that you in the boat there? In the boat?
You know, I would be probably the one closest to the front because I tend to have that type of orientation.
Ready to jump out, yeah?
Well, and so I kind of skipped over the tech trends on the last slide, but what you end up seeing is you end up seeing changes in your business that are complementary to the tech trends that we all see. Things like mobile hotspots. We weren't even thinking about those 3 years ago. You know, somebody could take their iPhone, stand up a hotspot on a commuter train between Groton and Boston and want to be able to use their iPad and remote desktop to get in and look at structures as they're going along. So one of the things that we're finding is people really don't have the patience to move any slower than 6 months to a year. They don't want to hear, again, the multi-year initiatives. So these are kind of the bits that we look at when we're looking at a project. And I know they seem a little bit like messages from Captain Obvious. Of course, you want to move quickly. Of course, you want to make sure that you understand both domains, but you really do have to understand what the individual line that you're supporting, whether it's chemistry or pharmacology, is trying to do and what their drivers are. So as we, let's say, outsource more HTS, we've got to look at which assays are we getting data back from that we need to quality control. Individually, the lines aren't going to stop and think, well, there's a difference in the data that I get back. These are non-standard assays that are proprietary to the vendor, and so QC there doesn't make sense. Auto-upload that data, right? But that's something that we can bring to the table in saying, just like B2B data exchange in the banking industry, we can take lessons here and say, this one's proprietary, don't QC, but all of these run a risk because they aren't proprietary, and we do want to quality check that data. So as we're talking about things like understanding both domains, it's really getting to know what's happening in the business and then applying your IT common sense and kind of your IT where we're going next view to things. I'm going to keep rattling for another bullet or two if you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep talking.
The other thing that I would make sure I mention is that you have to understand the question behind the question. And I'll give you an example. We had a very influential leader who was frustrated with his laptop. Pfizer standard issue, doesn't do all the cool things that his Mac does, and he wants to be able to use Skype. Well, we're not going to likely change the hierarchy of the hardware for Pfizer, for this leader. We're not likely going to drop our security objections to Skype because of secure packet encryption misses there. But we are able to look at things like WebEx and say, how can I tightly integrate WebEx one click with what he's using day to day? So when he's in his email, he can hit it, set up a meeting, and get it to go really quickly. So it's understanding more than just the list of requests that you have from your customer, but trying to take advantage of what you already have existing and make it work for their workflows.
Okay. Do you want to say more on that slide, or should we talk about the future? Yeah?
Let's keep going.
Okay, because the next slide is all about the future.
Yeah.
And this is the real nuts of it.
This is the exciting part.
Yeah. So how do you describe that to us, and how far within Pfizer have you got to achieving some of your objectives in this cycle of change?
Well, so the utility R&D services are things that we've had for a long time, right? So they're the basic nuts and bolts of running the operation, whether it's tell me where my compound is in the management process to help me do a substructure search, right? And there, I want to be able to have as many service-oriented architecture opportunities as I can. I want APIs so I can take things out, plug them back in. I want to be able to work with vendors collaboratively to say, you know, where it makes sense to have you lead, let's put you in the infrastructure, and where we've got other providers, I want you to play nicely with them in your capabilities. So that's probably the spot we're most mature in. But when I look at things like the collaborative ventures, those are things where we're working closely with partners in industry to make sure that we're developing products for the future, things like the Marcouche, I would say IBM and the patent data would be another example of where we're doing that. And we also are collaborating on primary data access tools with other vendors. So this is space I'd like to see us do more of, because the era of us having big software development houses are gone. We're not going to have 20 people coding basic applications. It's that ability to influence industry, work across companies. That's the space I see us needing to spend a lot of time. And then the place where I think we're least mature, but I look forward to getting more mature because we're going to need it for all our work with CROs, is the cross-industry consortia, things like Pistoia, Prismi now, used to be Prime and Prism,
yeah.
Prismi. Because we really need to be able to talk about data standards, which is not particularly sassy day to day, but really could make a difference for our ability to be agile for things our business customers are asking us for.
Okay, that's great. Well, there's a lot of, ChemAxon has quite a wide community of partners as well, who provide all sorts of solutions. So I think some of what you've described there will be interesting for them as well, because we're not the only people who would like to collaborate with you as a partner in terms of being a solution provider. So I think that personally you might also find interesting some of the people who are going to be presenting in the lightning round later on. Sarah, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Guys, if you have questions for Sarah, I think, it's always nice to have people who are on the strategic level giving us the insights into where Big Pharma is thinking about these things, and that's part of the reasons for having these keynotes. So a big thank you to Sarah. A big warm hand, please, and please do grab her for more information if you want that.
Thank you very much.